to the MASH report, and what a week it's been. In a speech on Wednesday, Boris Johnson offered up his liberal version of Brexit. Johnson claimed that his speech would offer hope and optimism. Look, let's face it, it's easy for Boris Johnson to be optimistic. You would be too if your life was just basically being terrible at your job and then immediately getting a better job. The way things are going, if Brexit goes badly enough, he's going to end up being the next James Bond. Who else could be Boris Johnson's Bond girl other than Boris Johnson? It's not the biggest stretch of the world at the end of the day. Boris Johnson and James Bond are both privately educated, wealthy white men who have complicated relationships with women and ethnic minorities. Remember that, when James Bond disguised himself as Japanese and everyone was like, that is normal. The speech offered nothing but empty rhetoric and nothing about what Brexit would actually involve. And that's what people are worried about now, especially in the week the Home Office announced in order to cope with the changes to our immigration system after leaving the EU, it's going to require a system that they said is almost certainly not going to be ready in time. When it comes to Brexit, why is nothing ever ready in time? Why on earth did we just trigger Article 50 without any thought of whether the 2-year time period would be enough to get everything sorted? So we're currently about to miss an unrealistic deadline that we set ourselves. That's like deciding you're going to achieve all your New Year's resolutions by the 2nd of January. It sounds like a good idea, but it's all going to end up with you on a treadmill screaming, "This clarinet has too many buttons and Spanish is muy dificulto!" The news this week was dominated by the appalling allegations of bullying, harassment and inappropriate sexual behaviour carried out by Oxfam workers. Initial accusations centred around Roland van Houwmeiren and his team who were assigned to Haiti after the 2010 earthquake. Oxfam then allowed some of them to resign. They faced no criminal investigation and, in some cases, were able to go and work for other charities. But now allegations are starting to spread to other Oxfam projects around the world. The Guardian described it as the aid sector's Me Too moment. Although, given that it's the aid sector, it's not so much hashtag Me Too as it is hashtag You Too. Seriously, you're supposed to be helping people. Are you fucking kidding me? Everything is terrible. This is clearly a horrific story, and some of the responses have been very strange. Trevor Kavanagh, writing in The Sun, took the opportunity to seemingly attack the concept of charity. He describes charity as one of Britain's dirtiest secrets, and then said big charity and corruption go together like mosquitoes and malaria. Look, nobody is denying that Oxfam have behaved appallingly, and there needs to be a serious investigation into how these abuses and cover-ups were being allowed to happen, and questions need to be asked. But those questions do not include, is charity good? Should we have charities? And is Pudsey a freeloading little shit? I bet he's got a healthy eye behind that patch. Now over to the MASH news desk for the latest headlines.
The latest headlines. Jamie Oliver's restaurant's in trouble as it emerges he is not Italian.
Teenage love poet wondering what rhymes with boner.
And savoury pancakes are bullshit, says Pope. But first, now that Valentine's Day is over, a married couple are relieved they don't have to have sex again until his birthday. Kenneth Kramer romanced his wife Joanna with mid-priced Belgian chocolates. The couple then endured 5 minutes of adequate lovemaking in the missionary position before resuming their comfortable brother and sister dynamic.
We've been married for about 5 years.
Is it? Gosh.
Yes. So at this point, it takes a good few months to gear ourselves up to see each other naked, doesn't it?
Yes, absolutely. It really, I mean, just the idea of it. But
Yes.
Once we get going,
Oh,
it is fine.
absolutely.
Really quite
really good.
lovely. And
yes.
Because I can think about Natalie Imbruglia. And who is it you pretend I am again, sweetheart?
Your brother Stephen.
Yes.
But we've got it out of the way now, so we don't have to do it again until his birthday.
Yes, and that's not until November.
Few weeks.
No, I can go back to seeing you as a totally asexual housemate whose bowel movements I overhear every morning.
And I can go back to touching myself in the shower.
Well, happy Valentine's Day,
Oh,
darling.
happy Valentine's Day.
Yes.
Yes.
And now for a special Winter Olympics bulletin from Nathan, who's trackside in Pyeongchang, where it's been an exciting day for Finland's Rinsu Skirnsson, taking the gold in the 2 by 4,000 metres uphill Nordic skjord.
Skirmson came in at 16 hours, 28 seconds and 14 trees, a mere hundredth of a tree ahead of Sweden's Günther Halbertsmardomsson. But it was a day of mixed fortunes for the Finns after Hedja Tryksa and Dygge Hulves were disqualified from the Chamsark ice fluting after a flagrant triple bök.
I understand there was upset in the men's Björteberg, with Sweden's Rinsung Bambog snapping his skension in a collision with teammate Bampu Bambak.
Actually, the real surprise came in the women's husky Svekling. Nenberg Benrug wowed the crowd with a 12-metre triple skryntarg, then immediately announced she was quitting sport to go feral.
I understand Agnetha Grangod was leading in this Svekling until the lead husky Svelborg succumbed to pelt rot in the final Hredlung.
Yes, the husky unfortunately took an early sauna, or as we say in Britain, they shot it.
Thanks, Nathan. We'll be back with more later.
This week, Jacob Rees-Mogg has quietly become the bookies' favourite to succeed in embattled Prime Minister Theresa May as leader of the Conservative Party. Taking a look at the man behind the headlines, please welcome Rachel Parris.
Thank you, that's right, Nish. Lots of people have been getting in touch to ask, who's this plucky upstart Jacob Rees-Mogg, and is he as much fun as he seems? Well, the answer is yes, Nish. Jacob Rees-Mogg is a huge amount of fun, quintessentially English and old-fashioned, a delightful Bertie Wooster-esque eccentric. Jeeves and Wooster, Downton Abbey, The Crown. British people love throwbacks to a simpler time when the upper classes ruled over us with patronising benevolence. Nish, do you like being patronised?
No.
No? I think you'll find you do. But is there more to Mogg than this old-fashioned facade? People are really engaging with Mogg's authenticity. He's not afraid to be traditional and vote with his deeply held Christian beliefs. So, let's take a quick look at this aristocrat millionaire's voting record. Now, as you can see here, he consistently votes against gay rights, women's reproductive rights, human rights and equality. He's an absolute rotter, isn't he, Nish? Just like Bertie Wooster in P.G. Woodhouse's acclaimed novels, Bertie and the Disabled Scrounger. And don't be gay, Jeeves. Rees-Mogg attributes many of his opinions to his Catholic faith. He's talked candidly about how his religion dictates that he opposes same-sex marriage. He also opposes abortion, even in cases of rape and incest. Oh, hang on, I've just seen this jaunty photo of him. He's such a card, I love him. So Rees-Mogg does seem to rather cherry-pick parts of the Bible to follow, though. He's oddly obsessed by the traditional marriage bit, but not so worried about all of the taking care of the poor and the meek. You see, Jesus was famously quite pro-meek, whereas Mogg is an unashamed meek sceptic. He voted to block unaccompanied child refugees in Calais from finding safety in the UK. Thinking about it, Rees-Mogg would have absolutely hated Jesus. He was an immigrant who could walk on water. Ah! Their worst nightmare! No passport control for the Son of God.
Absolutely not.
Now, the English love wordplay, and he's even got a half-hearted pun on his own name, Mogmentum. It's a play on the labour organisation Momentum, but he's got Mogg inside it, which isn't something any of us want. So let's just take a mogment to look at his attitude to women's reproductive rights. And one thing people really like about Mogg is that he's very polite. And when asked whether abortion should be opposed in every case, he replied, "I'm afraid so." Lovely. Well, etiquette is everything when it comes to who controls my womb. I've always been very clear on that, Nish. Another thing that people love about the pro-life Etonian is that he is unapologetic about his views. And I can understand that. When people hold terrible views that can ruin people's lives, the last thing you want is an apology. And you know who else was famously unapologetic in their views? All of the bad people in history. Indeed, Jacob Rees-Mogg stated in an interview, "I am what I am," echoing the voices of gay people across the world whose rights he's sought to curtail. So, Nish, the question is, was Jacob Rees-Mogg born this way, or is it more of a lifestyle choice?
I don't think anyone chooses to be Jacob Rees-Mogg.
No, I don't think so. Well, one thing is sure, Rees-Mogg's eccentricity, posed or authentic, provides the perfect cover for some horrifying reactionary values. A Mogg premiership would help return Britain to a golden age where women were second-class citizens, homosexuality was illegal, and foreigners, even desperate children, were treated with utter suspicion. It would be just like P.G. Woodhouse's hilarious novel, Bertie Erases 100 Years of Human Progress. Thank you, Nish.
Thank you very much, Rachel Parris. So, let's take a look at immigration. And apparently, that's something we need to do, given how often we hear this.
It's almost inevitable that we need to talk about immigration.
Who will say anything on this panel about the catastrophe of mass immigration?
Let's talk about why 640,000 people came last year.
And given on Wednesday morning, the Foreign Secretary said this.
But we also need to ask ourselves some hard questions about the impact of 20 years of uncontrolled immigration by low-skilled, low-wage workers and what many see as the consequent suppression of wages and failure to invest properly in the skills of indigenous young people.
OK, look, saying we need to ask ourselves some hard questions implies that we haven't been asking those questions already. Is it just me? I feel like all we do is talk about immigration. It feels like for most of my adult life, the only things we talk about are immigration and how we never talk about immigration. Also, Bake Off. And there was that time where we combined them both when Nadia Hussain was in it and the Daily Mail lost their mind and suggested that to win now you had to make something they called a chocolate mosque. Chocolate mosque sounds like Ben & Jerry's are launching new flavours to capture the religious market. Next it'll be Candy Floss Synagogue and Mint Choc Church. So, let's look at how these so-called hard questions have already been asked and answered and subsequently ignored. In May 2016, the Centre for Economic Performance published an exhaustive study on the impact of immigration from the EU on the UK between 1995 and 2015. The report concluded that EU immigrants had no impact on the jobs or wages of UK-born workers, had no negative effect on local services such as crime, health, or social housing, and paid more in tax than they took out in welfare and public services. The report finds, rather than being the fault of immigrants, these problems were the result of the 2008 crash and the slow economic recovery. So, why was this ignored? Well, maybe because facts are boring. Basically, the only person we'll tolerate facts from anymore is David Attenborough. It only took one episode of Blue Planet for him to single-handedly end straws. He's the first person in history to say that's the last straw and mean it literally. Boris Johnson ignored these facts because it clearly would have undermined the Leave campaign. In the lead-up to the vote, a pro-Brexit minister, Bernard Jenkin, told Newsnight they planned to go on the offensive on immigration. The hostility was relentless from the campaign and its supporters in the media. The writer Liz Gerard found that between the 1st of January and the date of the referendum, the Daily Mail and the Daily Express each published 34 front-page articles about immigration. In case you were wondering, none of them were positive. There were no headlines like "Immigrant saves boy from killer shark" or "Foreigners make a lovely jam." The Leave campaign was given a helping hand by years of anti-immigration sentiment that had been encouraged by these guys.
Immigration in this country, as I've said, was too high and out of control. Put simply, Britain was a soft touch.
We help our citizens get jobs instead of more immigration from abroad.
People want government to have control over the number of people coming here and the circumstances in which they come.
Cameron and Osborne spent years shifting the blame onto immigrants for worsening conditions for British people, when in fact it was their now discredited programme of austerity that was doing just that. But when the time came for them to lead a pro-EU campaign, the damage had already been done. The British electoral study asked around 15,000 voters one key question. What matters to you when deciding how to vote in the EU referendum? They took the responses and made it into a word cloud. This is what the Leave voters one looked like. That does not look like a word cloud. That looks like an MRI scan of Nigel Farage's brain. We've been subjected to years of lies about immigration, and I'm not the only one who thinks so. Last month, the Home Affairs Select Committee published a paper called Immigration Policy basis for building consensus, which said the government needs to be more proactive in challenging myths and inaccuracies and publish more factual information about the costs and benefits of immigration. And I'm afraid that while this is sound logic, it's a tad too late for the Brexit vote. It's a bit like shutting the stable door after the horse has not only bolted, but is now glue. And if we're to learn the lessons of the last... The horse doesn't exist. Who are you sympathising with? If we're to learn the lessons of the last few years, to move forward with a proper conversation about immigration, we need to dispel these myths. And remember that immigrants are human beings that don't deserve to be demonised to appease bigots or used to score political points, like these two morons did. But the sad fact is that intolerance to immigrants is an easy sell. They look different to you and they sound different to you. So everything must be their fault. Countering feeling with facts is difficult. Also, some people will never listen because their hostility is purely racist and there's no point in me, of all people, trying to change their minds. You never hear someone saying, you know why I stopped being racist? Because a brown man told me on the iPlayer.
Let's go over to the Match News desk for the latest headlines.
The latest headlines. Man takes second sick day for authenticity.
We must not betray Brexit, says man who would sell his mum for a sniff of power.
And snowboarding, just skateboarding for twats in cold places.
But first, Christians worldwide have been remembering the martyrdom of St Pancake of Antioch. St Pancake, born in rural Turkey around 500 AD, was a leading figure in the Byzantine Church with a reputation for charity and wisdom. But it is the manner of his execution for which he is best remembered. This week, millions reenacted St Pancake's death agonies.
He was beaten and battered, then stuffed full of cheese. St Pancake was subsequently fried on both sides. He was then tossed repeatedly into the air in a cruel mockery of his belief that he might one day ascend to heaven, or, as St Pancake himself described in his text, De Recipus, the righteously made shalt adhere to the celestial ceiling.
A moving tale of sacrifice and deliciousness.
More from us later.
Several recent polls have the Conservatives ahead of the Labour Party, including a YouGov survey which suggested the Tories are now 4 points in front. This despite all the infighting, ongoing austerity and the government's handling of Brexit. To tell us where the Labour Party is going wrong, it's the voice of Conservative Britain, Geoff Norcott.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank
you. Geoff, you seem pleased.
No, it's brilliant. I'm really enjoying it. Labour is so shit.
Right. I know it's unusual for the party in opposition to be behind at any time, let alone during the sort of current turmoil.
It's weird, isn't it? I mean, Corbyn was massive last year. This year, nothing. He's like fidget spinners, isn't he? He's... or Pokemon Go. There's old Corbachew there, which does sound strangely Russian, like most of his ideas. I think, you know, ultimately, a lot of the problems come from the Labour membership, you know. They're stuck with Corbyn, the Labour Party, and he knows that. Like all British workers, when they know they cannot be sacked, you kick back a bit, don't you? You sort of phone it in.
Yeah.
He's just sitting there thinking, the membership love me. I don't need to think of any coherent ideas. I'll just sit here and Google recipes for chutney, you know what I mean?
Labour have youth on their side. I mean, we all remember the sort of great youth quake at the last general election.
Yeah, and it turns out that youth quake didn't really happen. Youth vote only went up by 2.5%, so, you know, that's millennials, mate. Couldn't even be asked to turn up to their own statistic.
OK. But the surge in party membership, that can't be ignored.
No, that's their biggest problem, because you only had to be a Labour Party member for 30 seconds and you got to vote for their leader. It's harder to vote on Strictly than it is for Labour leader.
Do you think that their stance on Brexit is helping?
No, I don't think Strictly have a stance on Brexit.
OK, right. Look, any other areas of concern?
Yeah, Labour have also become increasingly identified with, like, identity politics.
Sure.
They had this conference up north, which initially they planned to charge white people more to attend, which is sort of a great way of offending everybody, isn't it? Speaking of which, there's also been a row over the Young Labour Equalities Conference, where if you're a straight, white, able-bodied male, you can't attend.
Yeah.
Who's going to put away the chairs, you know?
I mean, I don't know, Geoff.
I mean, if there's one thing white guys can do, we could put away a chair, Nish.
I mean...
Don't take that away from us.
As a representative of the Asian community, I'll say we'll give it a go. we seem to have done all right with medicine.
Yeah. All right, fair enough, fair enough. But they've also got a problem with the shadow cabinet. I mean, you've got, like, McDonnell, you've got Diane Abbott, Emily Thornberry, all of whom seem like sort of liabilities to much of
well,
Middle
Geoff,
England.
you say liabilities. May I remind you that our current Foreign Secretary is Boris Johnson?
Agreed. But the alternative is Emily Thornberry. I mean, she seems like a laugh, but she also seems a couple of bottles of Cava and she could start a missile crisis. It's like one heavy lunch, we could be balls deep in Yemen.
I mean, I'm not sure how that's different from our current policy, but anyway, continue.
You know what? I tell you, I think actually their biggest problem is, in terms of personality, a lot of people focus on Corbyn. I think it's John McDonnell. Let's have a look at the man himself. Looking scary as ever. He's a shadow chancellor, and some would say a raging communist. You know, he's a shadow chancellor. He doesn't even like money. That's like putting a vegan in charge of the barbecue. Great, everyone's getting grilled red peppers tonight. No lamb chops for anybody. That's how socialism works, basically.
Is it?
Yeah.
Is that really?
Yeah, that is exactly how socialism works.
OK, you can't just say that. You have to back this up. What has he done to make you think that he's some sort of secret revolutionary?
Loads. He stood in front of communist flags at a May Day rally. He was filmed giving a talk at a Marxist training camp. And you know that poster all lefties have of Che Guevara? Right. Yeah, his is signed. Yeah. His safe word is Stalin.
OK. If he's such a radical, why are businesses queuing up to have lunch with him?
Well, basically, CEOs want to know exactly how long they've got before they've got to flee the country, you know? Come on, Nish, if Piers Morgan became Director-General of the BBC, you'd have a little lunch, wouldn't you? Find out where his head's at.
I mean...
Build some bridges.
Yeah, with Piers Morgan, I'm pretty sure I know exactly where his head is at, and...
Very nice.
Look, Geoff, not that you'd want to help them, but do you have any advice on how Labour can get themselves out of this mess?
Well, yeah, I do have a few things. It's number one, just forget about the Northerners. You know, you'll never keep them happy. It's actually impossible. Just cut them adrift and focus on the NutriBullet wankers down south. That would be my advice.
OK, anything else that doesn't somehow manage to offend the entire country?
Yeah, bring back Ed Miliband. That would be the...
OK, so you think he'd do better?
No, I just think it'd be a laugh.
Right. I'm not having this, Geoff. Before you go, I want one constructive piece of advice. That's what you said you'd come here to do. We want one piece of advice.
OK, look, I'd just be honest about who Jeremy Corbyn is. Just say, yes, he does want to leave the EU. And we know he's just an old trot who likes pissing about in the allotment, knitting protest banners and blaming Thatcher because his telly doesn't work.
OK, come on, Geoff. Corbyn at least has captured people who weren't necessarily engaged in politics before. I mean, look at Grime for Corbyn. Look at that as a movement.
No, the youth stuff is bollocks, right? He doesn't know jack shit about grime music, yeah? When they said Stormzy's coming, he said, oh, better get the washing in then.
Ladies and gentlemen, Geoff Norcott!
Cheers, mate. Thank you.
Geoffrey?
The
Nice one, mate.
latest headlines. John McDonnell banned from Monopoly after nationalising all the utilities.
Other drinks cans think San Pellegrino is an arsehole.
And Miracle Cat knows when old people are about to be racist.
But first, it's emerged a woman who says you'll either love me or you'll hate me is universally hated. Donna Sheridan, aged 24, believes her blunt-speaking, no-nonsense approach to life wins her friends and enemies alike, despite it never having won her any friends. We spoke to Donna earlier.
I take no prisoners, I don't take crap from anyone, I'm real and I tell it like it is. And if you don't like me, then that is your problem. I split people down the middle, I'm a strong personality, like, I've done everything on my own, I haven't had any help from anybody, so at the end of the day, it's like, you know, if you can't drag yourself up, I'm not going to drag you up. You know what I mean? Like, everything I've done on my own, and at the end of the day, I'm not apologising for that, and I don't think I should have to. So sorry if your ego can't take it, but I can take it, and I'm willing to step out and be that person, so sorry, not sorry.
Everyone hates her.
That's all from us.
let's quickly go over to Rachel Parris at the social media wall to pick up on your comments and queries about all the stories coming in. Rachel!
Thanks, Nish. Obviously, earlier on, I criticised a leading Brexiteer, so I'm getting a lot of tweets calling me a snowflake bitch. Which the MASH digital team are telling me is great engagement. So please do keep those coming in. One of the less rabidly insane tweets has come in from Jacob's stepladder, who says, Jacob Rees-Mogg is smart, articulate, but best of all, unpretentious, as his son, Sixtus Dominic Boniface Christopher Rees-Mogg, will attest. What a lovely name. Apparently they call him Sixton Bonchris for short. Do you know that, Nish?
I don't, and I don't think that's true.
Another powerful political tweet here, this time about the Labour leader. Screw Corbyn! He is Hezbollah IRA shithead who will ruin this great country. Hang this Marxist traitor! It continues, die, 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 you bearded bastard, yours, Tony Blair. Oh, it's nice to have Tony Blair back in politics, isn't it, Nish?
It's like he was never away.
And on Bongo They Drink It in Cheltenham says, Valentine's Day can still be fun, even if you're single. I just had a delicious beef-flavoured ready meal, stuck on an erotic thriller and accidentally jizzed on the dog. A classic night in. Back to you, Nish.
Thank you, Rachel Parris. That's all from us. Don't forget to tune into our spin-off show, The MASH Report Extra Serving, starting right now in my own mind. Good night!